She's on the phone.
Yes. So I think she has like star 6 or something. It should be tough.
Pledge of allegiance, so we'll go ahead and pledge allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor Mahler,
Present.
Counselor Gerson,
Present.
Counselor Trask, Counselor Gorley, Counselor Sanchez,
Counselor Sanchez, are you on?
Here.
There we go.
Counselor
Yeah,
Richard.
it's a delay to unmute me. I'm here, sorry.
Present.
Thank you.
Let the record show we have 6 present with 1 non-present. Get started, new business, ARPA premium pay deduction.
Yeah, so as we're talking about funding and capital funds, and there's been some question as to the availability or the types of uses that the ARPA funds are able to be used for. One of those items is actually what they're referring to as premium pay. There are some limits as to what those levels are as far as who's able to receive that premium pay. Brandon has included a memo for you, which explains that you can't push basically 150% of the state's average annual wage, and that would mean that there are 5 employees with the city who would not be eligible for those, which would be our 5 highest paid, which you can probably imagine who those are, department heads. But the rest of the staff is available. And so we wanted to make sure that you had that, that information in front of you. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brandon and Blair. They're going to kind of talk you through some of the thought process with this premium pay, kind of explain a situation that we've run into. There's a slight discrepancy in the language between the AFSCME contract and the resolution which dictates non-represented employees. The AFSCME contract, those represented employees are set on a calendar year, so January 1 through December 31st. The resolution we passed was a budget year, so July 1 through the end of June. The issue with that is that inflation over the past 4 or 5 months has been through the roof. And so what the current resolution says would mean non-represented staff would receive 5.45% raise, because that's what CPI works out to over the past budget year. However, our staff, represented by AFSCME, because it's the calendar year, which means the cutoff was December 31st for that number, they're not seeing the CPI doesn't include these last several months. And so theirs actually equates to 1.23%. Well, however, their contract has a floor, which is 1.25%. So that bumps them up to 0.01%. So we want to have a discussion with you about that, the equity of that, the optics of that with staff, and the importance of our relationship with the AFSCME unit and the employees and how that has grown. Staff is, management has worked hard to build that relationship. If you'll recall a few months ago, well, about a year ago, non-represented staff forego their COLAs in an effort to help ensure that we wouldn't have to lay anybody off. And AFSCME turned around and did the same thing in their negotiations. So we kind of worked together to try and make sure everybody was able to stay employed and continue working. And we've continued to build on that relationship in-house on day-to-day functions and how we work and how we operate. So we want to make sure we don't damage that relationship, even though the reality is it would catch up in the next year. But there's still that 6-month gap where price of goods and cost of living is far outpacing what they've received. So we want to have that discussion with you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brandon and Blair and let them extrapolate on that a little bit.
As Ray covered before you is a memo discussing what the use of ARPA funds could potentially look like. I only included 2 provisions of the overall American Rescue Plan Act funding allotments and what those funds could be used for. So the first one, to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers. And then second, in line with kind of our discussions currently, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. There are 5 total allowable expenditures under the ARPA, under ARPA, but they don't really apply to what we've been discussing so far. So I only gave you those 2 at this moment. As Ray mentioned, part of I guess the initial consideration for providing a premium pay for work during the COVID period was to help offset some of the difference between what the General Services contract or AFSCME contract included as far as language, which would have limited their raises currently to 1.25% effective July 1. When CPI over the last 3 months has gone up well over 5%. That we're trying to find a way to help in that regard, because we understand the circumstances that the employees are under, given that when this contract was negotiated. I don't really know that any of us could have foreseen what is occurring right now, in that CPI in 2020 was so low, and suddenly in just a 3-month span, we've seen it go dramatic. We've seen a dramatic increase. So that was kind of where this idea was born, is to use ARPA funds to cover, to help offset some of that, I guess, sting, really. So what we've put before you is 3 different proposals, really, for a premium pay. The premium would be calculated based on their July 1, 2021 salary rate. So wherever folks were at on July 1, that would be what their percentage would be based on. We've included in the tiny little chart there for you premium pay of 3%, 5%, and 7%, and then the required ARPA money that would be necessary in order to pay out those premiums. As Ray alluded, there are some people, and this memo mentions that there are some people that are not included in this, which would be the department heads, 4 department heads, and the city manager, because they exceed 150% of the state's average wage. So under the ARPA provisions, we would not be able to include those individuals. So I did provide you with an example, just so you could kind of get an idea of what folks would be looking at. And again, if the council decides that this premium pay is something that they'd like to move forward with, we would talk about it tonight. Wouldn't really reach a decision, so to speak, but kind of get a consensus for which way the council might want to head, and then revisit this with kind of solid additional information and a resolution, probably something more official, so to speak, at your next council meeting, and the employees would receive that on their August payroll checks. So I can answer any questions. I don't know if Blair has anything to add to.
I was going to provide some context that Ray already stole. So.
Yep. We work really well together.
Sorry.
We just start and work down the line. So, anyways, there are a couple of folks here in the room too that employees of, actually mine, but representatives of the union as well. This premium pay is not specific to AFSCME. I do want to highlight that. The calculation in this includes AFSCME employees as well as Sweet Home Police Employees Association So police officers, dispatchers, and the community services officer. And then does include some of the
Non-represented.
lower level management staff, non-represented staff. So all of those people are in here in these dollar estimates for your review.
Questions of council?
I'm for it. I think it's a good idea. I think we should put more money in towards it. And I definitely think paying police more is never a bad idea. So yeah, there's my position.
Mr. Mayor, I have a
Right.
question. So, are we talking about this as a permanent raise or are we talking about it as a one-time premium pay?
So this would be a one-time.
Premium
A
pay?
one-time premium
Right.
pay would not affect the underlying rate.
Yeah, the base rates would remain the same. Those are contractual figures. So those base rates would not change.
This would operate independent of current resolutions, independent of the contracts that have been negotiated with the unions.
Okay.
So it's basically just like a one-time deal.
Mhm.
Thank you.
In my previous conversation, with the city manager, I firmly believe we need to take care of our employees. I was for it.
And if I might, if those who are giving feedback could indicate a level at which you think is appropriate, that would help staff as well.
Well, I think when we put money in the pockets of our workers, we also put it in the pockets of our businesses. And so it's a sound decision, especially with the cost of living increases. But at what level, I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councilor Corley. I think that it's definitely best if we put it, I think that I just agree with her, but I'm not sure exactly what a normal rate, I guess. Do you guys know what they?
So part of, we don't necessarily have a recommendation per se. I can tell you that some of the consideration for this was, like we kind of discussed, a way to kind of make up for where things are today versus what they're actually going to see in their cost of living adjustments. With that said, the 5% premium number would kind of catch them up, so to speak. Catch them up is maybe not the right term,
I
but
think 5% is a good number then.
I would agree with the 5%.
One thing to keep in mind also is this is the same pot of money that we're talking about for the later discussion at this workshop. And so whatever we do take is going to come from that same pot and reduce the amount that's available for infrastructure. But just to make sure, I'm not expressing an opinion one way or the other, but just to make sure that's understood.
Brandon, if I may, can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just have a little bit of heartburn over this because we literally sat in a couple council meetings ago and said, no, we're not ready to give money to small businesses, but yet here we're having a discussion to give raises to city employees. So I don't really know how to digest that.
Sure, and that's certainly a valid conversation, I think maybe for the council to have. Part of this consideration was, Sweet Home businesses have had opportunities through previous city grants during COVID, Lynn County grants, federal programs to help. And so, and what we saw during COVID as far as city programs, we didn't have a lot of participation in COVID funding from the city. Now, certainly there were, potential requirements for those funds, or not necessarily from the city standpoint, but from a federal perspective. And for some, they may have just decided it wasn't in the best interest for their business. But we've also haven't been able to in this moment address the impacts of COVID and let me try that again. We haven't been able to address the impacts of COVID on our staff. For 16 months now, our staff has excelled at continuing to offer the same level of service that we saw pre-COVID in an environment that was not ideal for them in that regard. Our public works crews were still providing water service to homes. We were still managing our collection efforts. Leaf pickups continued as normal. This city, because of its staff, didn't miss a beat. And we haven't been able to we can say thank you as many times until we're blue in the face, but we haven't really had an opportunity to present them with something that has something more tangible than our thank you. This is kind of our first shot given the allowance under this act.
Mr. Mayor, if I could add to Brandon's. The other thing I would point out is, yes, this is designated for COVID funds. And when COVID first broke out, and there were unusual circumstances, unusual work hours, I think I went 14 days without a day off at that point, and then a day, and then another 14 days. AFSCME employees, Sweet Home Police employees were right there with us, and at no time did they balk about serving the community. They worked every hour that was asked of them. They volunteered to work additional hours. That carried through as well into the fires when we were close to getting evacuation notices. Staff made arrangements with their families so they would still be working. That carried through into our most recent efforts with the heat and the cooling stations. With only a day or so's notice, we reached out to employees, asked them to man places that normally wouldn't be manned, such as this building and the library, and they didn't hesitate at all. It wasn't a matter of, do I have to? It's, when do you need me? I'm pretty proud of that. I just think they've done an exceptional job of maintaining the level of service. And quite honestly, throughout all of this, we have continued to push them to improve in many, many areas. And they have continued to do that in what they've done. So not only did we not slow down, I think you could argue that we continued to evolve as an organization, improve some efficiencies in some of the programs that we offer as well.
Mr. Mayor, I got a question for Brandon. Brandon, so I'm gonna make this perfectly clear. So we do 3, 5, 7, whatever the percentage is, okay? So is everyone that's available, I mean, that's can get this? So I'm just gonna throw a number out there. So it's $500 that's gonna cost. It's probably more than that. I don't know what the number is. So is that going to be for the rest of this coming year for the ones that are on the yearly thing, not the one that we live on? So then is that number going to stay there for the rest of their lives? And if it's $500 a month or $500 a year, whatever that number is, so is that going to carry over on their contract? Okay, so I can live with that. So this is like going to be like a bonus kind of a thing.
Yes,
Is that-
it will be a bonus.
It's a
And
bonus.
we
One time.
included that in the memo.
I'm okay with this.
The other thing I would add, so the calculation for each individual employee would be based on their annual salary rate.
Okay.
So cost of living adjustments applied July 1. We'd figure out what 12 months is. They would get, if it's 5%, they'd get 5% one time in August, and that's it.
So,
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to make perfectly clear that everybody that's listening to us or whatever, that that's what it is. It's not going to be a full-time 5% raise every, okay, I'm good. I'm good with the 5% too.
and I want to point out something that statistically, people at the lower end spend every dollar that they get. And people coming out of COVID, they're going to do the same thing. These people were going to spend it on gas and groceries, boards for the fence, auto oil, whatever it is. But those dollars on the average will circulate within our community 7 times before it leaves. So this isn't just, I'm going to spend this dollar and it's gone. it should circulate within our community 7 times for each dollar. So I really think that we're making a good choice here because these families need this, and it's not going to hurt us.
Just also speak on behalf of the business. I run a business, I own a business. And I was blessed with what type of business I had, being in essential service. I didn't need any funds to get me through every fucking time, no question. But there was a lot of businesses that didn't have it so fortunate. But just like Brandon said, I had a numerous amount of options out there for me as a business that I could have tapped into if I wanted to for funding to get me through the times. I chose not to because I didn't need it. So there's a lot of small businesses, they had those same options. It was just whether they got communicated with or whatever the case may be. So as far as businesses, they have their chances. I'm not knocking them, but on the bottom line is they have their ability, the same like anybody else, to tap into those. Some probably weren't aware of it because they weren't communicating. That comes down to communications. So, but I think this one thing for employees, I think our city staff did a phenomenal job during COVID time. I think they busted their butt. I think they deserve this one time, call it a bonus, however you want to look at it. I think in Councilor Corley is back correct. It's not like it leaves town and turn right around and spend it in the community. So to me, this is a win-win, but this shows our employees we care about them, and it's important to keep employees happy, especially right now. So that's why I'm fully in support of it. I think 5% is fair, and that would be my number I would be supporting.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to also say that the employees during all of this stuff that was going on, and even before that it wasn't just because of COVID that they did such a good job, but they've been doing a good job for quite a while now. And so I appreciate that too. I try to say that to them, and they, in some other ways sometimes, but it's very positive for me what they've been doing. And I give them a bunch of grief once in a while, but I hope that they know that I'm kidding with them, and because they are doing a good job. So, and that goes across the board, all of them. So I appreciate it.
I agree, Councilor Trask. I think it's very important, the job that everyone's doing. I think they've done a good job, especially dealing with COVID and also the fires this last year. You guys have had a long year, so it's much deserved. So thank you.
Any other questions or input? Councilor Sanchez, anything you want to add?
Well, I hate to be the devil's advocate, but I am also an essential worker, and I haven't had my rates go up in I don't know how long, and I'm still paying 43% higher fuel costs. So, I mean, I understand that everybody's working their butt off, but we have failing infrastructure and people throughout this town that have basically lost everything, and I'm on the fence. I'm really nervous with the way that this looks, and if we are going to do it for the city staff, I think that we need to at least consider doing it for the businesses, and even more so if there was a way, give everybody in the town $500 so it could be fair and equitable across the board, not just to the city staff.
If I can answer, and that option is certainly still on the table for the council. If you still wanted to put together some type of a grant program. So I don't think that any decisions have been made definitively by the council on how to spend this money.
I mean, doesn't the city have a lot of grants already now that people, isn't there money still in there for businesses that we got left over with COVID?
I think do we have to send some back?
So there were a couple programs that we participated in, one of which we already sent money back on because we didn't get enough response. That particular program had a lot of restrictions on it, mainly because it was aimed at those who didn't qualify for other federal help. And so it was very narrow in its scope. And so that was one that we ended up having to return money for. From what I've been able to, this whole time it's been difficult to make sure we're getting the word out. We've been doing everything we can when it comes to advertising, but unfortunately, we don't have great records when it comes to the people who are doing businesses in town, because we don't require them to register with us. And so we've done what we can to get the word out. we've probably missed some people. But everybody that I've talked to, I've tried to make it very clear and get the word out. If anybody needs help, to contact me, and let's talk it over and see what resources we can tap into. The only ones that I had a hard time finding help for were the movie theater and Steelhead Fitness. But then last December, I don't remember which one that one was called, but whatever act it was that was passed in December, there was some money that was specifically going toward event venues and movie theaters. And I know that the Rio was able to take hold of some of those. And then a couple of months ago, I believe Steelhead Fitness was able to access some county CARES Act money that helped them a lot as well. So as far as I know, those who have sought out help have received it.
Well, I feel like the city has done a very good job at saying when there's help or where there's help and how to get that. So I don't think we should be using these funds for that again.
Like I say, depending on what type of business, just like you said, Mr. Larson, depending on what type of business, there was a grant out there for various different types of businesses. It's up to those businesses to have, whether they weren't communicating with or what, maybe it's on us, I don't know. But there's so many different opportunities out there for businesses, depending on what type of business it was. They couldn't tap into a lot of different funds. They chose to, so I'm not saying that, we didn't communicate well enough, we did, as far as I can see, we did. Especially social media, city websites, various other sources I see. I thought the city did a good job communicating the help. There wasn't any needed, so.
I literally picked up the phone and started calling businesses I thought that would qualify, letting them know. And Kara just did that too.
I believe we worked with the chamber, and the chamber reached out to their membership as well. So I'm sure we missed some people.
You can't catch everybody.
Yeah.
You just can't. But everybody who was seeking it was able to get through to somebody.
Yes, at this point, further regarding this, we'll move on to the debt and capital project discussion.
So, Mr. Mayor, are you content with the consensus? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we'll put something together related to the premium pay component so that you can review it at your August 10th meeting, I think it is. Is that the right date? I think it's August 10th. Your first council meeting in August for an actual decision on it. Okay. Okay, so we last 2 weeks ago we had a work session on kind of debt options, looking at our capital projects, trying to determine what the appetite would be for taking on an additional debt load versus, how do we pay for that? We didn't really make any progress on that as far as where do we want to go with that. So what we thought might be helpful for you as a council is for us to kind of hit the drawing board, so to speak, kind of outline some things that we at least would recommend from a staff perspective to cover with ARPA funds, and then subsequently to take a potentially debt out for. So I'm going to roll through that real quick and then open it back up for discussion again on, is that kind of where the council would like to go? Do we want to go a different direction? And you can give us some insight in that regard. So on the screen, and it's a little small, so I apologize. What I have done is gone through and labeled projects that could be covered with ARPA funds with an A. So in column D here, we have what is labeled as round one, so to speak. If you'll remember, part of the ARPA allocation, the rules for that is we will receive 50% of it within the next several weeks. And then the other 50% would come next calendar year, about this same time. So we kind of broke projects into round 1 and round 2 in order to spend the dollars in the given time frames, so that we weren't overspending before we had the funds in our hand. Our recommendation would be to cover in round 1 the small diameter water line replacements for this current fiscal year, the water meter modernization project. So that project, if you remember, includes us purchasing, they're called Camstrup meters. They're ultrasonic meters that are more efficient, more effective, and will ensure stability for us in the long term. And then also the water treatment plant fluoride system replacement. Yeah. So the total for those 3 items is 1.11 million, and would essentially use up the first part of our ARPA allocation. What we are proposing in that second round would be to continue to spend ARPA funds on the small diameter water line replacements. Now, what I want to mention about that project is this is a budgeted project. We anticipated spending $250,000 a year, every year for the next 5 years, to work through the small diameter water mains that we have. Using ARPA dollars to cover that project ensures that we are opening up that $250,000 of our city funds to be used for something else in the future. So that was kind of the intent behind using ARPA money for that project. Take care of it now. Work with our engineer of record, figure out what we have left in the ground, where we need to replace small diameter water mains, get that done as fast as possible, and then move on to whatever other infrastructure needs exist in the city down the road. So that's kind of why that's on the replacement list using the ARPA funds. It helps us get through it as soon as possible. Also in that second round would be the water treatment plant raw water control valve replacement, and the water treatment plant turbidimeter meter replacement, as well as the installation of a self-service bulk water station. Lastly, Canyon Creek pump station. So that list of 7 projects would be covered with our 2 million. I had it somewhere. Here it is. Would be covered with our $2.2 million allocation from the federal government in ARPA funds.
Less the premium pay.
Less the premium pay. So we would have to make up a little in one of those projects probably, or drop one of those projects if the premium pay thing went through.
We had discussed a generator before. Where are we at on that?
We're still making progress on trying to determine where that funding might come from, if anywhere. So part of the consideration of using ARPA dollars, when Greg and I walked through this, was we still don't believe that we've tapped out all of the available options for funding an emergency generator at the water treatment plant. And so we really thought it would be prudent for us to first get through that process, figure out what grant funds are out there, figure out if there is somebody out there who wants to fund this project, because all we have so far is a plan, but we haven't been able to figure out who or what funding sources might exist. So we thought, don't put that on the ARPA list so that we could vet that out. And if we needed to in the future, come back and decide if we have $250,000 each year, we could self-fund that generator in 4 years, or if the council wanted to, that could be one of the debt items. So there'd be a lot of flexibility if we needed to fund that project on our own, or even provide a city match potentially.
Brandon, tell me on the self-service bulk water station.
The idea of the self-service bulk water station is there's a ton of staff time that is included in trying to handle bulk water. Right now, Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, but folks who want to fill up a truck or something, I guess just trucks really, construction. They come to Public Works. They check out with the Public Works team, get an application done. They get their truck inspected. They have to come over to City Hall. They have to pay for said bulk water filling. And then they go back to Public Works and actually fill the truck. Or at least get the meter to then hook up to a hydrant.
We either fill them bulk loads or through a deposit, like if it's a large vendor or construction site, they'll have a meter that they can either put on a hydrant or carry it themselves as a water tender.
So a self-service bulk water station would eliminate a lot of the staff time involved because they can just do that right there at that station. The other part is we've got folks going out to city fire hydrants or city hydrants and filling up. There is potential for damages on those hydrants because they're not, I mean, they're durable, but it is easy to potentially break those. We've got meters that are out then that we've paid hundreds of dollars for, maybe thousands of dollars for. I don't know how big those meters are.
Yeah, construction meters. Last time I checked, probably a couple of years ago, they were just under $1,700.
So we have those that we're handing out to folks to fill up with city water. So a lot of this would just kind of bring all of this in-house, give them one spot to go. It would have a card station, basically. They can pay on site based on the amount that they fill up. It would reduce the back and forth for somebody trying to fill up bulk water so that they don't have to come to City Hall and Public Works. It would make that process a lot faster. It just saves time and effort and materials cost.
Well,
Mayor,
I'm sorry. Will we see a return on this investment?
I would say yes, definitely in staff time, and if we're not having to purchase those construction meters and materials to fill up those trucks, yes.
If I can add to, we're also having conversations with the county about building, a dump station and fill station. Excuse me. They're having issues with their systems out at the campgrounds. And so they've been working with us for a little over a year now on selecting a site, running the utilities, that kind of thing. So we're looking at a partnership, how much of that we pay and how much they pay. I know they're arguably okay. However, if it's a revenue producer, does that mean they get 100% of the revenue?
We get the revenue.
I'll let you have that conversation with them then. Yeah.
That, because couldn't they be the same site?
Yes. Yes, they could.
Yeah, I think the last meeting we had with the director of parks with the county, they have a kind of a tentative idea of what they want to accomplish. They were looking for locations. They wanted to partner with us. They knew that, we've discussed our water issues with bulk filling, whether RVs or other type of fillers. And so they are actively, at least when we left the meeting, they are actively searching for grants, potentially to fund the whole thing. And we may not even have to do this at all, but our skin in the game is that we would work with them on the water side and the bulk filling side. So that's kind of where we're at. We haven't got a commitment other than we're searching for grants.
Mr. Mayor, I got a question. Greg, Renee, how many people use that system?
I'm only looking at Lacey because she usually has to take those payments sometimes.
Customers that come in regularly, I think they're billing at their home and an invoice monthly or every other month. Then we have some others that are just for a period of time. So I would say at least a couple of months on average.
So we're probably talking about 24 plus times a year that somebody would be using this service. And I think if we had a self-service station, we would see an increase of folks who are just coming down to grab some water.
They're paying me once, but they're going down and have to fill up 10 times.
Yeah, I was going to add that on a weekly basis, several times, sometimes even during the day, especially in the summer, as wells, we all know that they dry up. You're seeing people coming in with their own built trailers, and they're, instead of buying it and having it delivered, they're coming into Public Works, getting in themselves through the permit process, then taking it home and transferring it into their own tanks.
But if we're talking about a dump station and being able to fill up RVs too, with being able to pay at the site, I think we'll be seeing it multiple times a day being used. So
Well, I respectfully disagree with that part of it, but I'm concerned about how many people are going to use it, where it's going to be. And I've lived here a long time, and I've seen people get into our fire hydrants and just getting water wherever it is. And there's got to be consequences for that.
So,
I mean, absolutely.
so
gotta be
part of-
consequences, because if you don't, they're going to abuse the dickens out of it. We went through this a few years ago.
So part of this would also allow for, because right now, if, somebody passing, say, a truck that's filling up at a hydrant, it is not necessarily immediately known whether they did actually follow the process and get a permit. If anybody's filling up at a hydrant after this, they're not supposed to be,
No,
because
I
there is
understand that.
one way to get it
I
done.
understand that. But
So it would
people
help
that-
in that regard.
People that are coming from Albany are not going to stop here and get water for their trailer. That just isn't going to happen.
Maybe. I'm not going to, I don't want to say you're wrong, but what I will share is there is a lot of concern about the location of wells and septic systems at the county parks. It will certainly take some time to retrain people who have been utilizing the systems out there for extended period of times that they can dump here. But I know that is the long-term goal of the county, is that we would be essentially the dump station for, and then in turn filling station while they're there.
Are you checking about wastewater too?
Yeah.
So, Mr.
You get
Mayor,
more of that than you will water.
Very possibly. Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, do that many people actually use our fire hydrants to get water from?
Yeah, every construction project is utilizing.
I just didn't realize that.
Yeah, every single construction project will come and get a meter. It's probably a little more convenient for them because they pop it on there, close to where they're doing their work.
Probably at least one business would be not a big fan of it.
And actually, they might actually be, because it would be one location that it would make it easier for them. It would no longer rely on, accumulating invoices and billing and time and,
No, I understand that. I'm just, there is a dump station thing. In Sweet Home, I mean, in fairness, so, yeah, yes and no.
so Mr. Mayor, this project seems to me to be nice, and the possibility that we could get a grant is good. I'm kind of with Councilor Gorley. I have been very concerned about not having that generator. With the heat that we're having now and the possibility of more throughout the summer, I think we put more risk without having that generator than we do without having a water station. And I've been concerned about it for the last several months. I know we're working towards a grant, but I think if we've got the money, for me, we do it now. That's my.
I agree with the generator. I don't agree with the price.
and certainly these are estimates. And so obviously whatever the actual comes out to, that's what we would spend. And with the ARPA funds, we have until December 2024 to spend the ARPA funds. So if we come back and the generator is only 750,000 with install and hookup and everything else and integration into our system, if it's only 750,000, we come back and say, okay, we've got 350,000 left, folks. What would you like to do with it? I would also add that all of these projects total about $2.2 million. And so that's $2.2 million that the city had identified in city funding that would now be available to contribute to various infrastructure projects of its own. which would mean we would have $1 million of our own to be able to complete that emergency generator project if we were unable to secure grants or additional funding.
So please tell me if I was wrong. Did I hear a potential 4-year timeline on a generator?
I don't know.
So what kind of timeline are we looking at?
I have not heard that.
Oh, I
And
thought you said 4 earlier.
yeah, that's.
Okay.
I think,
No.
if I could, I think what he said is with the $250,000 a year savings that the ARPA is now paying for, that over that 4-year time frame, you would have the funding internally to pay for the generator.
Okay.
I think that's what he said.
Because it's a high priority. I think we should try to do that ASAP.
For the generator, I just, when it comes down to that generator, I actually would like to see the breakdown of how it comes to drive the price. Because it seems pretty dang high.
Mr. Mayor, I've also got, it seems like we kind of beat around the bush here a little bit about, well, you know what, we could get a grant for this, or we could get a grant possibly for that. And we're just kind of up in the air sometimes thinking, well, okay, maybe we can get a grant for the generator, or maybe we can get a grant for this water thing, and maybe we could get a grant for that, but we don't know. And are we going to spend our money first hoping we get the grants? I don't know how that's going to work for us.
And typically if we spend money first,
I understand.
you
some
can't
of
get
that, I
grants
do,
to backfill.
but I do get it, but I don't know if they're going to give us a grant after we already spent the money. Is that the way that works? No.
Not typically.
Yeah. So I think that to me, that's kind of iffy to me. And I agree with the mayor. I really, before we go and buy us a generator, I want to know how much it's going to cost. And I want to know how much it's going to cost to put it in.
All of these projects would still require council approval. Let me be very
understand
clear
that.
about that.
We understand.
So we're coming back before we do them. These are estimates so that we can kind of get a ballpark of what we need to do.
Yeah, I get that. And I'm not saying you guys are not doing a good job. I'm not
Right,
saying
right,
that.
right.
But for me, I'd like to have some sort of a solid number telling me that it's going to be 750,000 or $1,000,001.
So the generator site, because we could start selling pop cans. So are the other things on the list okay?
A kind of a crazy question, but do we need a fluoride system replace? I mean, like, do we need fluoride?
Oh, boy.
Can of worms opened.
Is your wife in the audience?
My mic's off.
So,
Mr. Mayor, if I may, okay. I can't hear people who aren't speaking in the microphone, so I don't know if I'm cutting over somebody or not. I apologize. If I may, I was involved in a meeting this afternoon with Senator Gerard and Representative Jamie Kate, and there was some discussion for federal and down the pike. And so I also am concerned about spending money prior to having all the information, because I feel as though there's some more money coming down. As well as during the discussion, it was talking about public safety and coming up with some sort of traffic plan and saying that ODOT is not willing to assist us with that. So I would really like to set aside some money from the ARPA for that traffic plan so we can be ready to get into the game when the federal funding comes available to do better on our public safety for Highway 20. That's where I'm at with some of the spending. Things kind of changed for me over the course of that meeting this afternoon.
So I do want to make one point that ARPA funds cannot be used for streets or traffic safety, unfortunately. I mean, certainly I know there are people in this room who wish that that could happen, but we, under the provisions of the American Rescue Plan Act, we're unable to spend it on streets or traffic safety or things that ODOT would maybe have normally helped us out with. The other point I want to make about this is we are in no way guaranteeing we're not going to go out tomorrow and spend these dollars. What we're trying to do is put together a plan so that we have a general idea of which way the council wants us to go with these funds, because we have to be able to report to the U.S. Treasury once a quarter, once we start drawing those funds on what we're doing.
On these items on this list, any of these that we feel very comfortable are not going to get a grant on. In other words, we're not going to get any.
It's always a
Understand that.
crapshoot. Yeah.
you know, but I mean,
Water
if
meters, you're
we're
not gonna get a
talking
grant
about
for.
if we were-
Yeah, I would say it's easy to say we would
No,
not
I
get a
would-
grant. Go ahead, Counselor.
Counselor
Yeah,
Sanchez.
I was still curious about that because Senator Gerard and Representative Kate both mentioned setting aside ARPA money for a traffic plan. So I don't really understand the conflicting information. And then our last council meeting, or the council meeting when we first talked about the ARPA money, we were thinking about sitting on it. And then not to mention last council meeting, what if we have overruns on the wastewater treatment facility? And so we could use that money for that too, so we don't get overruns and get caught off guard. I just think it might be slightly premature to try to divvy out that money right at this time, in my opinion.
So as far as so the senator and the representative discussing setting aside ARPA funds, the city's ability to set aside funds is very cut and dry as far as what the bill allows for, what the act allows for. The county certainly has different requirements and may be able to spend their funding a different way. So it's possible that going and visiting the county and asking for some help with that is possible. Or I know that the Senate and the House of Representatives at the state level, they have a lot more flexibility in spending their ARPA allocations in as they see fit. But the city ability is significantly more, I guess I'll say, ratcheted down, and is very clear about water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure only.
Okay, thank you, Brandon.
One thing is though, when we do replace water lines in a street, then we get to repave that street. And so
Using our original city dollars.
So there's that.
Again, small diameter water line replacement.
That we're probably not getting a grant on. To go back to that, I would say that the small diameter water line replacement, we're likely not going to be able to get a grant on. The water meter modernization project, probably not going to be grant funded at all. The items other than the emergency generator that deal with the water treatment plant would be a very, I would almost doubt that we would be able to get grant funding on any of those as well.
So that would be one thought to think about, the ones that we don't get grants on. Next thing would be, instead of, having one a small diameter water line replacement, it's just getting it done. I mean, instead of splitting it two, getting it done now.
Well, and that's kind of what we need as staff is direction from you of what do you want us to do. So that's why. So last time we kind of vomited all of these projects on you, and we didn't get any consensus. So this time we're trying to help by giving you recommendations and spur what has been some really good discussion. But the reality is, and I'm quite certain you guys and gals are tired of hearing this, but this is why you get paid the big bucks.
Again, I go back to, for me, it's either wastewater or it's, water.
Which all of these are, I think, for the most part. So it's a matter of,
But like don't take this wrong, the self-service pump station is not a high priority.
then I would suggest that you ask the council to remove it from the list. And if there's a consensus to remove it, right, that's just it. So this is where the politics come in.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
if I may, I mean, we don't need the bulk water station right now. It's not one of my priorities. I don't hear it come up very often, so I'm fine with taking it.
Dollars. And if it streamlines process for our staff, $40,000 isn't a lot of money.
True, but again, we can get the county to actually spend $1 for us. I think that some of them.
So we have this in number 2, right?
Yeah, so
We just need the county to do it before number 2 happens.
and again, these were all projects that the city had tied dollars to in its 5-year capital plan. So if 5 years from now we get to the end of this and we haven't received any support from a neighboring local government organization, then we can certainly revisit it and decide to go at it on our own.
I figure if county can give 10 million to Millersburg, they give us a couple dollars.
At least they can do.
So I've taken that off the list. Are there other changes that you all would like to see? Again, this is an initial plan. We can make changes, but we just want to get an idea of where to kind of send staff on, what's next.
So, Mr. Mayor, I would like the generator turned green.
I'm happy to do that, and I will subsequently ask what on this list are you going to reduce? So you've reduced 40,000, which means you need another 960,000 in order for me to put that on the list. So which items are you taking off to fund that project?
I understand the importance of a generator. Like I really do. I get that we need one, but I just feel like right now, I don't think that we should.
Oh, no, 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 no. Our city needs water in fire season, and we almost lost our cookies last year. So I would say that of many things, that's incredibly high priority because you can't fight fire without water in this town. So, or
Not that it's not.
water in toilets. So
But if you have a water line that's not working, hydrants, then you may want to consider that when you have water for your function.
And I'm not, it
I
is
know.
a high priority. I just right now's high priorities are different.
So I can add some value to some of this. So small diameter water line replacement, that project is $1 million. So we could go back to using city funds to accomplish those water lines in favor of moving the funding over to the emergency generator if the council wanted to see that. The water meter modernization project is budgeted at 650,000. That's an option. You could certainly revisit that down the road.
Excuse me, Brandon, would you explain which one of these projects are currently in the budget? In the current budget we just passed?
The highlighted column here, the FY22 capital costs, these are the items in the budget that is currently
That we just
that
passed?
that you just adopted
Okay.
in June.
For me, the small water diameter, that's a priority. The generator is important, I agree. But I still question the price. Fluoride, hopefully we get that accomplished without people's teeth falling out someday.
Sorry, but is fluoride like a good thing? I mean, I don't know anything about fluoride in water.
Oh,
We've
So-
got 25 minutes.
yeah, Councilor Rich, there's some history that we could fill you in on. Yeah, but what I'll also add is there's a lot of new chatter on the internet. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea for the council to revisit that, but I don't think.
I know. I'll stop about the fluoride after this. But I was just at the doctor's the other day, and he told me it's not a good thing. So that's just all I'm getting.
I would be happy to schedule a work session on fluoride, and I guarantee you it will take an hour.
So if the council it believes that the emergency generator project is a high priority, I can tell you that. So we have an initial not proposal, but kind of plan that was drafted by a third party. Is that correct, Greg?
Yeah, we went through an exercise and they identified our needs and came up with what Pac Power thought was our ideal storage system and would also provide power to the plant and potentially parts of the community.
So if we feel that it's a priority, I can tell you that in 2 years, by the time we're able to spin up a contractor, or, engineer the project, spin up a contractor to get ready to install and actually install in that time frame within 2 years, you could have $1 million in city funds based on these other projects that are currently sitting here in this proposal. So if you wanted to make that happen, the city could make that happen in 2 years.
I mean, for me, the generator, I do think it is a high priority. I do. I really do think that we should get it done, but it's just that price tag is really just, I cannot swallow it. it to me is.
And again, it's an estimate. I hope that you're correct. I hope we can get it for significantly less. And if we can, we certainly will. Again, our purchasing policy, it will be engineered, it will go out to bid. You will approve that to go out to bid. When the bid comes in, you would approve or disapprove what we get as a response. So based on that.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, I think that this is very important because I can tell you, I think I've been on 10 wildland fires. And guess what's the biggest problem? Water.
Right.
If you don't have water, you can't put out a house fire. And so are we willing to risk that for 100 houses like down in Medford is burned down before we can get water to it? And I tell you, it's not successful a lot of the times, but you can't fight anything without water, period. You cannot. And if that thing goes down, we're going to have a mess on our hands, even bigger than what we will because when the houses start burning, they burn and you can't stop them. They just keep going and going and going. So I think it's very important to have that. The sooner the better. On the other side of that, this money we're getting from the feds or wherever it's coming from, I really believe that we should put that toward the wastewater plants so that we can cut down on the cost that we're going to have for $18 million sooner or later to cover that whole bill. It's not going to be cheap. And we can't, my opinion, we can't afford to get a bunch more bills go out for money that we can't hardly, we're not going to be able to pay it very easily. When you got an $18 million bill, it could be, maybe it's going to be less. Hopefully it is. But to me, we should use that money for our infrastructure and get a better deal on the wastewater plant.
To your point, Prass, I don't see any wastewater on this list. That's.
Yeah, I understand.
And this is just the water. It certainly, if I scroll up, there are plenty of other projects, including the wastewater project. We just went through and made an initial list of priorities. Part of the reason we left the wastewater off of that. So our current estimates are that we would be looking at about 12 million in debt necessary for the city to go out for. We're looking at, I think it was 30 years with USDA. We can cover that in our existing rate structure. So that was part of the logic behind staff's recommendation and not putting that on this list. But certainly you could take all 2.2 million less the 5% if you're doing the premium pay and send that over to the treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant project. There are lots of options, but we just kind of wanted a conversation starter for you.
Give me a side.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
As we're talking about this, I think that the $1 million generator is a very good investment because it's going to help every single community member in our town. I think it's a really good selling point for people wanting to come to town when we can make sure that we provide water to them. And then if we couple that with the main water line replacement, that would probably be the $2 million, and then hope that we could get the generator for less. I think that those two things coupled together would maybe speak volumes to the residents that have to pay a lot of money in water fees, and then they would get more value for their dollar. I think they'd be really happy.
So how would the council feel about me moving up the emergency generator project to use ARPA funds and returning the small diameter water line replacements back to a $250,000 a year, 4-year cycle?
I mean all at the same time.
I honestly, I'm still saying that we need a generator, but that 1 million is about $500,000 too much.
Could you guys get us like a few quotes first, and then we'll get back to you?
You know,
Based on some of my experience with generator.
Well,
I think
that is a quote that's.
So
I mean, is it?
I've had discussions. So remember, when you're talking just initial planning, there's a lot of comparisons of equipment and assumptions made way, way high up. May I suggest that we start, if we're going to go in this direction, that we start a task order with our engineer of record. They can take the study that we just completed with Pac Power, integrate it into their findings, decide what are the best options for us determine what those options are, the cost for those options, and then bringing back maybe not a 35,000 feet, but something a little bit higher. And you can look and see exactly where those funds are going to be charged and how they're going to be allocated and to the sophistication of the system. And I think it would probably spark some good discussion.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
And not to pressure you, but it's a 6:15. We have roughly 10 to 15 minutes for you to give us some direction, or we'll have to have another work session.
Mr. Mayor, I think that what Craig just outlined for us is very realistic and would give us information that we desperately want along this project. I think this project is really a top priority, and the more information we can get, the better we're going to make the decision.
I agree with that on the generator, but like I said, I just. Too stinking high.
Mr. Mayor,
And it could also give you a
Anything on
time
this-
frame
Yeah,
as
so
well.
The other thing on this list to me, the only thing that really stands out, as far as what you're showing, sent to me, is a small diameter water line replacement. To me, that's the generator, and that's the only thing that stands out on the list.
Mr. Mayor, I talked to an electrician that I've known for a long, long time, and he said that $1 million figure may not be out of line. And I don't know that. I'm not an electrician. I don't have a clue. And I'm pretty sure that the stuff that they put in back there 20 years ago or however, it probably doesn't meet the standard we need to meet. So,
And I realize that when government's involved, just like in the city hall, when it went from a local contractor to redo the city hall was 400,000, and then we went to prevailing wages and
yeah.
getting quotes, it went up to almost $1 million. So I understand the difference between government and private things, but I still want to see a breakdown of that generator. And I think it's a priority. I think generators is needed. I'm not questioning. But anything on this list, small diameter water line is another one I see as a priority.
Well, Mr. Mayor, you need a consensus or you need a motion?
I think we need.
A motion. Just.
Yeah, you can't make a decision in a work session, so it's by consensus.
So I'm hearing the two things you care the most about and want the $2 million ARPA monies to be spent on is small diameter water main replacements and the water treatment plant emergency generator. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, I agree with that. But we do have $371,000 budgeted now for the small lot, right?
We have 250,000. So I did
250,000.
increase that 371,400. I made it 371,400 to use what we would get in the first year of ARPA funds.
I see. Okay,
Um,
so 250,000, which
Right.
will do some of it, right? Okay.
So thank you for the work that you guys have all done on
Yeah.
putting this together.
One last thing you wanted to throw in. Counselor Sanchez, you had one more thing you were starting to say.
Oh, no, I just agree with doubling those two things up to give them more bang for their buck, and then they would just be happy that they would always have water potentially and have really good water at that. I think that's a really good use of the money. If we can't use it on the traffic plan, and then maybe with what we have set aside for the water mains, we can maybe get a master plan for the traffic and hopefully go that direction with that later.
I agree with that. So that's your consensus. Okay? And as far as traffic plan, maybe we'll give speed tickets. We can take care of that.
Yeah, that's not a Ferguson comes to mind when you talk about that.
Anyway, those two more. We have.
So on the